Hey everybody, welcome back to the LuckyDog podcast. This is your host, Elias. Today we are discussing Doctor Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and the Love Bomb, more commonly known as Doctor Strangelove 1964. Doctor Strangelove is a black comedy film that satirizes the Cold War fears of nuclear conflict between the Soviet Union and the United States. This film was directed, produced, and co-written by Stanley Kubrick. It stars Peter Sellers, George C. Scott, Sterling Hayden, and Slim Pickens. So I'm not exactly a major Kubrickian fan. I very much like a lot of the films that he puts out, and so one of my favorite films of his is 2001: Space Odyssey, and I definitely enjoy a lot of his other films that he's been come to known as the director of major movies such as like Spartacus. He's responsible for creating directing Full Metal Jacket, The Shining, Barry Lyndon, Clockwork Orange, Lolita, Spartacus. I mean, The Killing. He's done tons of memorable pieces of media, and this is just one of them, of course, that I wanted to go back and kind of do a little bit of a retro review of, Doctor Strangelove. I honestly had no idea about the cultural influences of this movie, what it was even about. Like, I was very much in the dark about this movie in regards to the rest of his movies. Like, I knew the Eyes Wide Shut's a little bit about infidelity. 2001 is about AI. Full Metal Jacket is military. And all those are very loosely based themes. But I had no idea what Doctor Strangelove was, and so picking out this PG hour 35-minute movie. Happens to be in black and white, released in 1964. I'll admit, I was a little bit skeptical, but I knew that having Stanley Kubrick behind the camera and Terry Southern, Peter George's book, which is based off of the book Red Alert, and Terry Southern is on this as well as another writer to add some punch-up comedy chops. Now, the thing about this movie is, why is it held in such high regards as a Stanley Kubrick movie and a piece of cinema? Well, it's my understanding that this movie is ahead of its time. It's a movie that takes on a satire of discussing about nuclear holocaust and the people that are actually in charge of choosing these major decisions that could result in the loss of millions and millions of lives. And so Kubrick, what it seems to have been portraying on screen, is he kind of wanted to poke fun at it. When originally he was creating this movie and writing it, he was not writing it too much for the comedy. He was writing it much more for the messaging of it, which is something I always find interesting for Kubrick to do. I think that this movie has a very strong message when it comes to kind of poking fun at the people that are most responsible for pulling some of the most important triggers in our lives. It kind of showing the ridiculousness of it all as well. This movie also stars Tracy Reed as Miss Scott and a young James Earl Jones, which I believe it's actually his first movie, first feature. And so everyone knows, well, if you're a film fanatic, if you're a movie buff, you know that Stanley Kubrick was incredibly meticulous. There are probably 1,000 facts that you can go behind the scenes to find out about this movie. Just the meticulous details that Stanley Kubrick went with, creating Warcrafts, aircrafts and war rooms, and just creating this illusion of you really being at these three main locations, which for the majority of the movie you are at a military base, you're in a war room, or you're following I think it's a B-20 something. I don't remember what it was. A B-22, a B-52 bomber, which is an airplane back in the day that used to, drop drop mega bombs, mega nuclear bombs. So starting this movie out, actually, the majority of the movie, I had no idea one of the main characters, main actors, Peter Sellers. I guess I don't know if this is a spoiler alert or not, because I really didn't know about this at first. Maybe I'll push this to the side, but Peter Sellers is pulling an amazing performance as his character. I'll push what I really mean to the spoiler section, but Peter Sellers is amazing in this. George C. Scott as Jin Buck Turdison. That guy had me rolling throughout the entire movie. I think something about this movie that's really stands out. Not only is the cinematography really beautiful, the black and white is exceptionally sharp on this. I think this is some of the best camera work I've seen in early movie making history, and acting as well. The performance that George C. Scott puts on. Apparently, he had the background of, he had everyone on set just rolling laughing, like everybody couldn't keep it together. So apparently, they had to do these takes so many times. One thing that we know about Stanley Kubrick is he's notorious for kind of like fucking with the actors and whatnot. And so apparently he told Slim Pickens as Maj King Kong that he wasn't even in a comedy, that he thinks he's in a real war film or something like that. And so I thought it was interesting that he's telling all of these different characters, Stanley Kubrick is kind of giving all of these different directions from many different people. Now, before I go any further, I will say there's no way I'm going to be able to cover all of the minor details in this movie, even down to the messaging. So I might have to add it in the show notes. I will refer the Unspooled podcast with Paul Scheer and Amy Nichols, I think her name is, and Bald Move also has a good conversation on their podcast for a Doctor Strangelove movie review. So those are two great movie reviews that kind of cover the behind the scenes a little bit more, and might talk a little bit more about the messaging of this movie. I'm going to try to talk more or less about the technicals of this movie, and how this is way more of a technical achievement than I had ever thought that this was going to be initially starting out. And so yes, all of the performances in this are extremely well cast and well directed. They're clearly, I'm not completely versed in Peter Sellers as an actor. I know that he's generally a comedic actor, and he's been known as one of the greatest comedic actors of all times. He's been in Being There. He was in the Pink Panther. He's known as he was like Inspector Jacques Clouseau. He's been in movies such as The Prisoner. He's been in Murder by Death. He's been in a lot of different movies that honestly I'm kind of in the dark in at the moment. And this is the type of movie that you want to go back and rewatch and check out other people's filmography. Like George C. Scott literally had me rolling on the ground. Like I was laughing, like laughing loud. And I don't remember too many movies this early, before the 70s, that I was really busting the gut laughing. And it's interesting how this movie is written. It feels almost modern day in a way. So with a slight over hyper masculine feel to it, because yes, this movie does have its cons with regards to maybe how they treat the women characters. Although because it is satire, it's almost like just kind of poking at it. There's this over sensualization throughout the entire movie of sexual. There's this sexuality overtone of, women want my essence and stuff like that, and it's not something I'm comfortable in exploring in this podcast too in depth, but apparently there's just like tons of phallic imagery in this as well. Like the B-52 apparently is like supposed to look like a massive, throbbing boner or something like that. But there is a lot of sensual writing in this as well. They kind of equate the the inevitable explosion that you're waiting for in the same way they kind of talk about like sex. And so let me see what else we got right here. So yes, let me go to the pros and cons for Doctor Strangelove. So yes, the cinematography. Some of the cinematography in this is absolutely stunning. The war room is iconic. One of the final images of seeing the missiles. Before, I'm not going to go into spoilers yet, but one of the final images is ultimately iconic and has been parodied over and over and over. There was actually a major rewrite at the very end, or there's a scene that is supposed to happen that actually doesn't happen. Might talk about it in the spoilers here in a little bit. Acting amazing. The cons might come from the ending for some people. I've heard some people want to kind of rejigger the ending a little bit. Not like they want to completely change the movie, but maybe the editing in the very end could have been rearranged so it makes slightly more narrative sense. I do think the women's roles in this movie were extremely underserved, but considering how much imagery and phallic imagery there is and sensual writing there is in the movie with regards to how they discuss women and whatnot, obviously in some ways it's supposed to be just poking fun at the idea of maybe like infidelity or something like that, or being in a non-monogamous relationship or something like that. However, it's definitely got notions of like hyper masculinity in a way. But it's not necessarily a con, and I don't want people to listen to this and be like, oh shit, he didn't like the movie. No, that's not true. And yes, I understand that there weren't tons of women soldiers at the time, and they definitely weren't in the war room, so there's very few and far opportunities to have major roles for them. Although I do think the one that we had was very good for the limited screen time she's in there, as Tracy Reed as Mrs. Scott. And so that's about it I can talk about in spoiler free section. I will say, if you are interested in Doctor Strangelove at all, or Stanley Kubrick, absolutely go back and check this movie out. It's not a movie that you're gonna fall asleep in or something like that, or if you're gonna find boring, or I feel like there might be some sort of notion that, or maybe stigma, that the movies made back in the day just are not nearly as interesting, and they don't have the pacing like today's movies do. And that's certainly true in some situations, but Stanley Kubrick continues to impress me, especially with his earlier filmography, such as Doctor Strangelove, just with regards of the camera work, simply just creating an interesting movie. And what I hear is this might be his only true comedy. I don't know if he's really written anything this funny or directed anything as funny as Doctor Strangelove. Just the characters, they're so rich. The design of the movie, I love the titling and everything, and just the overall nature of the kind of playful nature they have of this movie, which is something I just was not expecting. So yes, check out Doctor Strangelove. Let me know what you thought about it. Let's hop into the spoiler section. And so now we are in the spoiler section of Doctor Strangelove, or Howard Learned to Stop Worrying, and the Love Bomb. We know what happens at the very end of this movie. The B-52 happens to get to its target and drops the nuke, thus starting what I guess is going to be the nuclear holocaust. And it's Doctor Strangelove's idea, or basically what they want to do is go under in these bunkers, have 10 women to 1 man ratios, have basically a restart of the planet. It is this big, long kind of, I don't want to say conspiracy, but it's an elaborate plan that is happening under the watch of Strangelove. And honestly, the one con I would say I really had with some of the hamminess of the performances is that it was, I know that it's supposed to be satire and you're supposed to have this, hilarious time, but there is really this kind of dark layer underneath it with regards to talking about, politicians and them having the ability to, turn on the doomsday machine, thus, ending many, many lives. And so, yes, I did want to talk about Peter Sellers as Captain Mandrake, President Merkin Muffley, and Dr. Strangelove. The entire time I was watching this, I had no idea that was the same character. I think that it's kind of important that if you're someone like me that is that was not born for 40 years later after this movie was released, you probably wouldn't know this. And even with some of the most iconic imagery, such as Slim Pickens riding the missile down, like that would that's iconic imagery that is replayed and shown over and over. However, the fact that Peter Sellers plays all 3 of these characters and has a distinct accent and it really engrosses himself in the character is quite amazing to me personally. I thought this was some of the best acting I've seen in a very long time with regards of the movie being this early. So I was absolutely blown away. He had me cracking up so many times as Mandrake and Merkin Muffley. And Doctor Strangelove is an enjoyable character to just kind of watch, but I do kind of feel like he kind of plays it up a little bit, and so I had some mixed feelings with the way that his hand was going in the Nazi salute and Heil Hitler kind of thing, and he just couldn't control himself. I thought that was a little bit over the edge, but I guess because you hear the ridiculousness of the nature of what's going on in this war room, I guess that makes sense. And Unspooled podcast does confirm that apparently having this there is a disease where your hand or your arm can be doing some other things outside of what your body tells it to do, which is crazy insane to think about. Let me see. Okay, so George C. Scott is General Buck Turtison. He's probably one of my favorite supporting actors in this. I guess he is like the main supporting actor besides Sterling Hayden. Sterling Hayden's he's not quite, you might call him a misogynist just in the way that he kind of talks about women taking his essence and him drinking distilled water and all this bullshit. It's like this guy has clearly lost his shit, and he's apparently the actor was going through some real shit when he was playing this character, and you can tell this guy is a veteran actor. I haven't seen him in terribly too many things. He's best known for being in Doctor Strangelove, and he was also in The Killing and The Godfather. Amazing actor. The camera choices they use on Jack the Ripper, Jack D. Ripper, are intense. I think this is, like I said, some of the best framing I've seen in earlier movies in a very long time. The cinematographer on this was Gilbert Taylor, who was also the cinematographer for Star Wars, Flash Gordon, and The Omen '76. I had no idea this was the same cinematographer as all that. He's got quite a resume. Let me see if there's anything. He also did Dracula as well. So yeah, he did Star Wars: A New Hope. I guess he was the only. That was the only Star Wars he actually worked on. Interesting. So let me see. I kind of forgot who was the cinematographer for 2001. I gotta check that real quick. Cinematographer is Godfrey Unsworth. Oh, okay. So yeah, and that was the same cinematographer for Cabaret, Superman, and I don't see. Was that Murder on the Orient? No, that wasn't a Kubrick one. But yeah, so let me see what else we got for this movie. All right, let's kind of go down the list. The intro credits, very stylish, big and bold, and it really sets the tone of the satire of what we're about to watch. It kind of, if this was someone announcing it, it'd be Doctor Strangelove. It looks very big and bold. There's also like this warning at the very beginning of the movie. I think that says like, this is satire. Don't take this seriously. Don't have a riot. I'm very curious to see how people were taking this movie back in the day. I wonder if I can talk to somebody that might know. Jack D. Ripper chewing the hell on the script. Speaking of chewing, he's got that big ass phallic cigar apparently that he just keeps in his mouth, and gum was constantly all in the war room to keep people from smoking. I didn't even think about that. Which, did nobody smoke in the war room? I can't remember. The airplane is obviously miniatures and scales, and some very interesting information with regards of how Kubrick was trying to match the B-52 bomber scale to make it look like it was actually flying. It does look like a scale, but it kind of adds to the point of it being satire, which I liked. Let's see. I love the attire of Mrs. Scott. Let me see. Jack D. Ripper, I believe, is talking about the commie and what they are or what they look like. I was thinking how stressful this could be and anxiety inducing. I mean, some of the stuff that Jack D. Ripper is actually reciting is kind of like, oh my Lanta. It feels like stuff that military generals and people that are having to deal with this kind of military lifestyle day to day, you actually would develop some sort of craziness or anxiety just constantly being in that environment. He's talking about shoot first, questions later. The camera pushing in on the switches is it's probably one of the first times it's been shown on screen. I love how every time the B-52 has all these little buttons and little switches and knobs and dings and dongs that gotta be switched on and flipped and whatever else. I love how he's just pushing in every time that it's switched. The camera pans in on it and kind of zooms in pretty fast. I think this is some of the best camera work, like I've said, that I've seen in a very long time in a movie this early. The small radio that they show in this for 1964, I thought that was pretty cool. I was very surprised about how modern some of the tech actually did look. I think they had like a small hidden camera, small radio, small, a lot of things were scaled to the size they are today that I was kind of surprised. The low shot of Ripper, I think talking about when the women are trying to take my essence, and they want my, fluids, and they want my energy, and they want to take me down. Uh, and it definitely couldn't be. Are you supposed to drink distilled water? I don't like think that's good for you, is it? But anyways, I that framing of the shot of Ripper just like smoking the hell out of this cigar and just kind of going into this crazy madman era is it's a really powerful scene. When they're talking about General Turdison, it's like Jesus, oh my gosh, like that ridiculous. I loved some Slim Pickens. I think there's at one point he's like announcing this list of like, we need a M42s, we need the AK-37s, we need the B-52s, we need the condoms, we need the food, we need the beer, we need a fella could have a good time in Vegas with all this. And so I was like, oh, this is pretty funny. Like, this is like modern day writing that is it's kind of deadpan in a way, but it's my kind of humor, honestly. And the Dimitri conversation, holy shit! This is when Mufflin Merkler, President Mufflin Murky or whatever the hell his name is going off. It's let me see if I can find his fucking name. What the hell is his name? Mufflin Murfin. President Merkin Muffley, which apparently means like a pussy hat or something like that. I don't even know what a pussy wig or something. I don't know. But apparently the president is supposed to be perceived as kind of a pushover, and what I think the Unspooled podcast said that his direction was, as Muffley was to be kind of like a overly zealous or serious teacher, and that's exactly what he kind of plays it as. And I thinking about the movie makes me want to go back and rewatch it just for the types of performances they were really trying to get out of each other. I think he talks about like being poisoned by fluoride or something like that. Like, was it Russia or something? I don't know. That's Ripper. And there's one scene where Turdison falls after making kind of like this, little impassioned speech to the president. And apparently that was completely improvised. Like, he didn't mean to actually fall, and they kept it in there. And there's little signs that, he starts laughing in the back, but apparently Kubrick kept it in the final cut. I was very surprised Jack kills himself. I was like, holy shit. But as soon as he walked in there, I was like, this guy is no long. He's not ready for it. He doesn't want to face the music. The sound effects and the sound design in this movie are pretty damn good for 64. I don't know if they went back and did kind of a revamp on the cut I got, but very impressed. I mean, it actually feels like you're inside the cockpit of a B-52. And I don't remember I don't know if I mentioned this in the spoiler-free part of the podcast, but apparently they recreated that B-52 from a model, from a picture of a B-52, because apparently the Army did not want to have anything to do with this movie. And after this movie was released, they actually went back and started. The United States government said they increased their security protocol after they saw this movie. It's like, what? This satire movie made y'all go back and rethink the chances of what if we had a crazy general that sent a bombing plane out and they couldn't get the bombing plane back in time. Like, this wasn't already a protocol. It's like kind of scary to think about that. Now, in a way, this movie can be looked at as, not anti-propaganda, but, movies that are very much in this scrutinizing of American wars. And it's interesting how this can be still applied to today because, I mean, war seems to be something that, happens ongoingly, regardless of where you are or what time you seem to be living in. I had a flashback to the nuke falling scene with the guy riding it. With the guy riding, with Slim Pickens riding it. I don't remember exactly the first time I've seen this. I probably have seen it parodied. There's probably Slim Pickens was on commercials. I've heard that they've tried to really milk this scene for what it's worth. I don't remember the first time I saw it, but as soon as he's straddling the "Hi There" and "Dear John" nukes, I knew that it was done. I just knew that he was long gone. And if you think about it, I'm pretty sure if that nuke went down, that entire plane is gone. Like, there is nothing left. So it at the end, I guess what they're implying is that nuclear war has begun. And the original scene that was cut from the ending was apparently this massive pie fight with all of these guys in the war room, just kind of looking ridiculous. And in a way, I'm really glad they decided not to do it, because Bald Move says that Bald Move podcast said that they dug up some information regarding that Kubrick would not find that satirical. He would find that parody, which I think is very important when creating this movie. Overall, this movie is extremely quotable. It's funny as hell. An overall interesting piece of satire cinema with a strong cast and script regarding nuclear holocausts. Mind blown. I am mind blown about Peter Sellers' performance. Especially his performance as what's his name? Mandrake. I think his performance as Mandrake is one of the best. Just his rapport with Jack D. Ripper it's just hilarious. I don't really know much better to say it. There's also kind of interesting, not so subtle product placement with talking about the Coca-Cola machine, and if you fuck this up, you're gonna have to go talk to the Coca-Cola Company or something. You're gonna have to go report to the Coca-Cola Company. And I thought the delivery of that is just hilarious. I don't know this. Somehow they're just shameless about it. And there wasn't too much. Like, fucking Sonic Hedgehog had like 20 different product placements, and they were shameless about it. So yeah, we find out Strangelove was a lion-ass Nazi. Peter Bull was actually a Russian spy. And overall, this movie, it still stands up as one of the most dynamic pieces of cinema, with some of the most interesting character actors that they could choose. It's got a great direction, and Kubrick continues to blow my mind. Let me see if I can find some fun facts that I haven't already mentioned. Let me see. So yeah. A lot of the stuff you'll hear, I don't really want to just repeat everything that you hear from the ending. Peter Sellers was paid $1 million, 55% of the film's budget. Holy shit. Stanley Kubrick's famous quip, "I got 3 for the price of 6." That's what I heard because, that's what I read, because Peter Sellers had to play 3 different people, and I heard that they wouldn't actually pay for him to be there without doing those characters. He was actually supposed to play the Slim Pickens character as well, but from what I heard, he injured his leg either through a sprained ankle or broke his leg during the filming of the nuke scene, falling down. Let me see what else we got. This was all happening during the right right around the JFK presidency and what was going on with the Cuban Missile Crisis and whatnot like that. I don't think JFK had actually passed yet. Oh, whoops. Yep, he had passed. JFK passed November 22nd, 1963, the year before this was released. So it actually he probably passed during the pre-production or production stages of shooting the actual film, unfortunately. Let me see what else we got for some fun facts. I don't know if that was a fun fact, but let me see what else we got. Peter Sellers improvised most of his lines. Oh wow, I did not know that. I guess this is all IMDb trivia as well. Kubrick did an insane amount of reading for this. It says he read nearly 50 books about nuclear war. Holy bejesus. George C. Scott was repeatedly annoyed that Stanley Kubrick was pushing him to overact for his role. While he vowed to never work with Kubrick again, Scott eventually saw this as one of his favorite performances. Yeah, honestly, I really like George C. Scott's performance in this. He's almost theatrically ridiculous. Let's see. There's a great deal of editing and cutaway shots in the sequence where Dr. Strangelove gets carried away in the war room and is out of control. Right hand makes Nazi salutes and tries to strangle him, mainly to cover up the cast around him crackling up with laughter. Despite this, Peter Bull, playing Soviet Ambassador Desansky, whatever the fuck, can be glimpsed trying to suppress his laughter. Wow. Yeah, so what I heard was everybody on the set was just freaking cracking up. In Strangelove's glove, Dr. Strangelove's glove is from Stanley Kubrick's personal collection. Peter Sellers had seen Kubrick wearing them Peter Sellers had seen Kubrick wearing them to handle hot lights on the set, and they thought they looked sinister. He wore one on his right hand, the one not under his control, to add to Strangeless eeriness. So yeah, I actually had heard that they were adjusting lights with that glove, and they're like, we need that glove for the film. I always find it very interesting to find these, hidden gems about movies that are very fascinating, like stuff that's never written in the script, like the glove. Like that's amazing that's in there. I tell you what really takes the cake is The Toys That Made Us on Netflix. Is a great show that kind of shows how a lot of major media, such as like Star Wars and popular 80s media that happen to have toys with involved in it, how that was influenced. The toys influenced what they put on the screen. And so I always find it, fascinating when they find some sort of hidden element on set, or, while they're writing the script, or very close to the end of the making of the production, when they say, oh yes, we need to add that, and it happens to be that one or two things really enhance the movie. I think another one I can think of would be Heath Ledger kind of adding the improvised, I think it was like a lip, like he's like licking his lips a little bit in The Dark Knight, and I'm pretty sure that was improvised as well. Don't take my word for it, but there's several things that actors bring to their roles that can never be stated enough, and so it's things like that are always fun to find. But yeah, thank you for listening, watching Dr. Strangelove. Maybe what do you want to talk about the title of the film? He stopped worrying about the love bomb and just said let it ride. I mean, Jack D. Ripper fucking lost his mind basically. And that's pretty much the essential key. I mean, if anyone has a better interpretation of it, then please let me know down below. I'm always open to hear new opinions on the film. I might have a different opinion on it as soon as I rewatch it again, or even listen to a couple other podcasts about it and just learn about it. But all these performances, all of the good things about this movie cannot be understated enough. And if you are interested in cinema, you need to watch it as well. So, thank you for watching Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying, and The Love Bomb. For additional LuckyDog podcasts, you can check out Google Play, Apple iTunes, Soundcloud, Overcast, YouTube, Twitch. We're on all of the popular podcast apps, Facebook, Twitter, all of the good stuff. If you want to hop in the chat room, go on to Discord. The Discord link is down below as well. We could not do this podcast without your support. Thank you for helping us, expand, grow, share the podcast. And like I said, as always, check YouTube if you want to get these podcasts early. I typically drop podcasts weekly on Tuesday, and I might have some new releases at the end of the week. But generally, if you subscribe, you should get everything on Tuesdays. And YouTube is available instantly. So if you're like, oh my gosh, I can't wait for the next LuckyDog podcast, so go to YouTube, check it out. LuckyDog Podcast, that's where you'll find us. Thank you for listening to LuckyDog Podcast, and take it easy.